listening to Changing Reality. Changing Reality, where we bend reality all across the world. Only on WQHS Radio.
So, hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of Changing Reality. We have our amazing guest speaker on today. I'll give us a quick intro about the show before we hop in. But before we start, Changing Reality is a show that basically features phenomenal people from all walks of life who are, in essence, changing their own reality. So in this show, we get to hang out and interview brilliant people from social change makers, entrepreneurs, industry leaders, business owners, to even artists, musicians, and inspiring individuals from all across the world, and hear from the Penn campus as well. And by hearing these stories, hopefully we'll be able to pick out little nuggets of wisdom that we can use to shorten our own learning curves as well. And this is a show that I'm very passionate about doing because I feel like there are a lot of people out there who do phenomenal things and make waves in the lives of those around them. And by uncovering those stories, hopefully we'll figure out what it means for us to change our own realities and the capacities that we can as well. So a little bit about the show. We're on WQHS Radio, which is Penn student-run radio channel. Very exciting to be here, as well as I am your host. So my name is Harsha, and I am actually your DJ in a sense for Changing Reality. And this show is something that personally speaks to me and resonates with what I do as well. I'm a true believer in the power of stories, hence, the whole theme of what we do. I am actually an entrepreneur, so I actually founded and run a youth movement called Ascendance back at home in Malaysia, which is where I'm from, that today collaborates with not just our Malaysian Ministry of Education, but works with over 26 countries to provide an alternative education platform for any student who wants to change their reality. So we work with over 50,000 students, 1,000 communities, and have been fortunate to work with countless number of student-run projects and social enterprises fully run by students as young as 8 to 25 years old, in helping students discover what they love doing, learn about themselves and the world around them, and start their own careers while they're still in school. This is something that, I think is really meaningful, not just to, everyday students out there, but specifically to students at Penn here, because this show provides a little bit of insight to, the abilities and, the things that we have that enable us to grow and flourish. And as someone who is an entrepreneur myself, who works with a lot of young entrepreneurs, sometimes figuring out the basics can be really tough. It can look like there's no way forward, and it can look like it's a lonely journey. And I know a lot of students at Penn and all around the world really face that same issue. So hopefully that this show is the platform for you to ask the questions that, are deep inside of you, that you've been dying to speak to an expert about, or learn from the experiences of people who have walked in your shoes before, who were once where you were, and who made the same, triumphs and mistakes that all of us do. So with all of these little insights, if there's any specific things that you want to talk about, whether they're specific experiences, industries that you want to cover, or even just, situations that you wish you wanted a bit more clarity and clarification on, feel free to let us know, and we'll try to, make sure that we bring on the guests, the sessions, and, the experiences that most benefit you guys. So without further ado, let's move into our session for today. We have an amazing speaker with us who heads strategic growth offerings at Deloitte and previously served as their chief analytics officer for Deloitte Analytics as well. He has more than 24 years of experience in human resource strategies, advanced analytical consultant, and has worked with clients in numerous industries from telecommunications, life sciences, medical devices, utilities, public sector, manufacturing, retail, financial services, not-for-profits, and so many more. Without further ado, let's welcome another amazing Penn alumni to our virtual stage, David.
Good morning.
Hi, David. How are you doing? We were just talking about the weather before this, so hopefully you can breathe well and everything's going good for you.
Yeah, it's in New York, Connecticut. Wednesday and Thursday had a apocalyptic nature to it, but things are have cleared out up here. I know it flowed down to Philly and DC, but up here we're doing all right.
So not too bad, okay? It's just the pre-apocalypse. We can just see how it looked like a filter on Instagram. But
I don't understand how it goes from Nova Scotia to Washington D.C., but maybe that's your next show. You can bring a weather system or ecological expert to explain how this happens.
I would, but I fear it would make me too depressed by the end of it. Like, oh no, we're all gonna die in a sense. So we're looking to you to give us hope for this whole week. Okay,
Yeah.
everyone's been
Yeah.
sad, so you've got to cheer us all up with your amazing story. And thank
We'll bring the energy.
and thank you for being on the show as well.
So,
So just to start us off, we've been in this very weird week where we're all thinking about the future, climate change, all of these very stressful things. The already stressed out Penn students are now doubling down with it, and our hairs are starting to gray as well. So let's hopefully take things back a notch. Listen to your experiences a little bit. So tell us, in a sense, what was it like when you were a student, even before Penn, looking at what you wanted to do in high school, in a sense? I know, spoilers, that you were a pro football player, but what was it like, thinking about, being in high school, having this whole future of uncertainty ahead of you, like many of our incoming freshmen who have just found out they're getting into Penn? And how did you go about the big question, which is, what do you want to do next?
Yeah, kind of the first thing is it's a stressful part of your life, and it's a stressful part of any of our journeys. I always kind of try to, two messages to the numerous, high school and college folks that I interact with through my walk of life in my community and beyond. First is don't be hard on yourself. We're all trying to figure it out, and it's hard and it's not easy. Very few of us have our act together around what we want to do, career-wise and professionally, as we're moved through our kind of 17 to 22 year old phase of our life. So don't be hard on yourself. Everyone's going through it. There's no recipe. There's no blueprint that everyone should follow. And sometimes I get worried for those who do think they have it all figured out at 2021, because I think the world changes and you as a person change. So first is don't be hard on yourself. Second is, though, be planful and be proactive. Don't sit back and wait for or expect it to just happen on its own. You have to and wait for it to come to you. You have to go after it. For me personally, when I was from a very humble socioeconomic background in Meriden, Connecticut, and because of my abilities academically and athletically, had the exposure and the ability to meet with some very interesting people as I came into my junior, senior years of high school, but I had no idea what I wanted to do. I wanted to teach math and coach football, like my dad did, and follow in those footsteps. And as I kind of grew and had different opportunities and exposures, I met a individual who was an alumnus at the University of Pennsylvania after a football game, my junior year Thanksgiving game, and he said to me, "You played well today. What subjects do you like in school?" And I said, I like math. And he said, "Well, what do you want to do with it?" I said, "I want to be a teacher." And he said, "There's other things you might be able to do with that background. Come to my office on Monday and let's chat a little bit about the University of Pennsylvania and some of the things you might be able to do with that math aptitude." And he introduced me to a whole wide variety of things I had no understanding of, from investment banking to actuarial to analytics, etc. And that was kind of the first person who really helped me start to think about, what the possible could be, given my set of competencies, and kind of took it from there.
No, very, very cool. I heard that Penn wasn't even your first choice. So very, very sad about that in a sense. But tell me a little bit about, that why you made that decision in the end to get to Penn and why not the rival school? But what was it like going into Penn? It's very, like, on one side, yes, amazing sports and everything, but it's also kind of has this exciting yet unique environment of people in a sense. When I first got on campus, I was like, okay, it's obviously there's a mistake. I should not be here in a sense. These people are way too smart and way too out of the league, and all of these people are the same in a sense. So
Yeah.
How was it like for you? And after time, I realized, okay, everyone felt that. Okay, you felt that. We're all good in a sense. But how was it like for you? Stepping into this whole kind of whirlpool of people from different interests, people with different skills and
Yeah.
talents.
Yeah. Well, so two-part question, two-part answer. My growing up in Connecticut, my dad was a football coach, teacher, and our goal was always to attend Yale, and as a high school student athlete, that was always my goal. And for my junior year, I started to be recruited by University of Pennsylvania, Columbia, Brown, Boston College, et cetera, and of course Yale. I injured my knee my senior year of high school, and at that point, Yale kind of got shaky on me as a student athlete candidate, put me on the wait list. University of Pennsylvania continued to recruit me hard as a student athlete, and I grew into a very deep relationship with the coaches and other alumni at the university. And I signed my letter of intent to come to the University of Pennsylvania on a Monday night. My family was elated. Coaches that were there with me, alumni, were elated. The next morning, I found out that I got off the wait list and was accepted at Yale. Conundrum, good problem. But my perspective was that the University of Pennsylvania stuck with me the whole time, made me feel valued the whole time. I loved the fit. I loved the opportunity at Wharton. That was the school that I was focused on within the university, and decided to stay with the University of Pennsylvania, even though my lifetime dream became an option. But it was important. It was just important to me that to dance with the one you came with, and the University of Pennsylvania stuck with me, and that's the reason why I stuck with them, and thrilled that I did. In terms of coming onto campus, it's so funny, like you said. When you're a football player, you become a football player before you become a student, because football camp starts in August and the school year starts in September, beginning of September. So you start practicing and becoming part of that ecosystem before you become part of the broader university ecosystem. And one of the things that was really important to me, and I don't know why I had this foresight, but was to not be defined by being a football player or an athlete, to really immerse. The University of Pennsylvania has presented such a diverse set of opportunities from every dimension, subject matter, speakers, seminars, classes, individuals, classmates, social opportunities. And it was really important to me, and I really coach folks who have similar opportunities, to immerse broadly and diversify your background, the ability to learn from so many different people and classes and seminars and speakers, etc. I really pushed myself to immerse as much as I could in that, and not be, focused solely on my classes and playing football.
I've got a question on that end, but before I do, I'm going to take the moment to just, embarrass you a little bit and put in
Yeah.
a photo from, okay, so tell me about this, okay? Very, very cool photo. Franklin Field.
Is that an actor from a movie, or is that me?
I don't know. What do you think? Yeah.
Bradley Cooper? I don't know. Man, I can't.
That's fun for the summer, yeah.
Yeah, that was Parents' Weekend, one of the great traditions at the University of Pennsylvania, is that for one of the games, our home games, our parents come down, and our family. In this case, it was my mom and my sister who greeted me, and they announce all the players, and they meet their parents or family at midfield. And again, in my case, it was my sister and my mom. That was my family for the event, and just a great opportunity to share that time, be proud of where you came from, and be proud of where you are, and the aspirations to where you're going. So.
Well, other than it being a good photo, it's still like, in that moment, like, it is, to your point earlier, hard not to be defined by, things like playing football, or even things that you're interested in.
Yeah.
And I agree, Penn is so diverse in the opportunities and the things that you can try and things that you can experience, and maybe even a metaphor for life itself. I think we tend to get siloed on the things that we know we're good at, the things that we are used to, in a sense that sometimes it gets hard to kind of explore these different options. How do you make sure that you were being proactive in going and doing all of these different things, especially with the very packed schedule of having the academics, having the football training, having all of these
Yeah.
different things to do, in a sense? How did you find the rhythm, find the space between, to actually be able to still be an expert in your field, but not let that limit you as
Yeah.
you kind of go ahead?
Yeah, I think it was interesting when I was a student athlete, at Penn. I actually found that I was more productive and more effective academically and from a social outreach perspective during the season. Um, I was in a routine. I was disciplined. Got up at a certain time, went to classes, had time to study and work during the day. Knew what time my practice was, knew what time films was, knew what time meals and dinner were. But while you're immersed in that, it was important to me. First you have to be aware, and then you need to plan and follow through. So the first thing was tapping into it's a very different era in 1986 in terms of how to find what was going on campus. Now, with everything being online, it's so much easier, so much more efficient.
So you can
But
Google it. Yeah.
but just having the awareness to seek to look for what is happening and make sure that I had it, calendared and was aware of how it could and what could and how it could fit into my calendar was something that is kind of step one. So knowing the types of outreach you want to do and understanding what opportunities present themselves and when they are and where they are and what time they are, that proactiveness was kind of step one. And kind of then step two was, having the energy, the enthusiasm, when you're tired and you kind of don't feel like it, to say, this opportunity is going to be worth it. Go pursue it, fit it into the day, fit it into your calendar. And I would say I very rarely regretted making myself available to, experience what outside my normal class schedule, my athletic schedule afforded me at the university. It was a big part of kind of my broad development.
Very, very cool. I also want to transition into talking about your time after Penn. One of the things that in university we complain a lot, and I know this because I'm a big complainer and a big fan of all the other fellow complainers. But we complain a lot, but in a sense, a lot of things are still within control. You have a schedule. You can kind of find a rhythm to it, in a sense, and a lot of it is kind of external, and you don't decide on everything that's happening in your life. You just kind of put together the pieces much better than when you were in high school when everything's decided for you. But it's still like you're still not 100% bracing the world by yourself, in a way. How was it like for you? I think you like, looking back, you have like the path that every Penn student wants to take, in a sense. But how was it like for you, stepping out of Penn and deciding what you wanted to do next, and having those first, initial years of being truly, I wouldn't say on your own, but being able to craft that decisions, that schedules. Like, I know for me, I work with a lot of young entrepreneurs, which are super productive, super on the spot, when they're in school, because they just have a limited time to get things done. The moment school finishes, we're like floating, in a sense. We're like, what happens here? What happens there? They can't like kind of reconcile being the person that makes all the decisions and having to be the proactive one. What was your experience like?
Yeah, again, I think there's two questions there. One is kind of how did I go from student to the business world? And maybe a perspective or two there, and then just a little bit about, as you start your career, kind of the balancing act, how to keep all the spinning plates spinning. In terms of kind of transitioning from student to professional world, a couple things, when you're focused on kind of the business world, and I don't, whether it's banking, whether it's consulting, whether it's corporate, whether it's not for profit, what have you, I can't strongly enough recommend being aggressive and proactive around internships. And the crazy thing is, essentially my daughter went to University of Michigan, and it was September of her junior year, and we were thinking about internships. And I was like, let me see what my firm Deloitte's doing from an internship perspective. It was mid-September, so I called the person from Deloitte who runs the recruiting at the University of Michigan, and I said, my daughter's a junior, thinking about interning with the firm, when is interviews? And he's like, Friday. This is a Tuesday. I'm like, it's September 12th, like Friday. So I just, one of the things I would just say to, students as you kind of think about internships, seems like the timeline is super early. It's, September of your sophomore year if you're looking for a junior internship, junior if you're looking for an internship for your junior and senior year. So, being proactive around internships and getting a chance to actually kick the tires on what you think your interest might be during summer is a really, really good idea. So that's kind of, point one. As a candidate, I got, really aggressive kind of my junior year and worked with career services and worked with my own personal network to identify, given my capabilities, around math, I think communication skills, math, science, aptitude, et cetera, what would be the possible, whether it was consulting, corporate, banking, et cetera. And, really got focused on building my portfolio of opportunities and, getting proactive around the interview process, et cetera. I decided to go into consulting and took my math capability and took an actuarial analyst position at a firm called Towers Parent in Boston. As I went into the work world, it's kind of funny. I was very naive. I came from a very humble socioeconomic background. Penn helped me kind of raise my game a little bit, but I didn't understand. I was not well prepared for professional world, even though I did an internship before my senior year as well. But I kind of thought just showing up because I went to Wharton that the red carpet would be rolled out and I would be a star. And I didn't realize that having a degree from the University of Pennsylvania and or the Wharton School within that, it opens the door for you, but it also puts a target on your back because there's a lot of folks in the entities you join that are like, Ivy League person, probably bringing a lot of ego, probably, let's see what kind of capability they have. And it almost, there's a challenge to kind of meet up to the brand that our university has. And I didn't realize that at all when I first started. And I kind of got knocked on my back a little bit as my work ethic didn't tag my first year or two at Towers what it did through my journey through and through graduation day at the University of Pennsylvania. So I quickly realized I had to raise my game. In raising your game, it's interesting. I always kind of felt like there were kind of four levers that I was always kind of pushing and pulling: the family lever, the personal, the Dave lever, the work lever, and for me, the athletics lever. And I always felt that I was always trying to be very attuned to which part of my life was I over-indexing on or under-indexing on, and tried to call to my attention, I'm really cranking at work right now, and I'm really driving hard at work, and I'm putting 14-hour days in consistent basis. Am I losing the family dimension or the personal dimension? Where am I investing heavily? Where am I slipping? And how do I kind of looked at my life as sort of a 4-asset portfolio between myself, my family, my friend system, and work. and to this day, I really kind of try to focus on keeping a balance between those four dimensions of my life. Whenever I'm over-indexing on one, I can feel myself getting out of balance, and try to, push myself to invest in that part of my life that I maybe have let slip over the past, days, weeks, months, whatever it is.
Nice. That is a very relatable quadrant of information. I'm going to use that next time. When someone says, "Why aren't you doing this?" I'm like, "Oh, my portfolio is kind of out of balance right now. I've got to take a rain check." But in actuality, one of the things that I really struggle with is meeting that balance. I think part of me also has that. Oh gosh, people have invested so much in my education, in me, in me as the human being, as the entrepreneur, that I feel like I always have to be 110 at work in a sense. And I see all those other elements in my life kind of just ripple and die at times in a sense.
Yeah.
And how do you, or what was the first moment you realized that, oh man, I've got to pull back on one of these areas and I've got to reinvest the time and the energy in another area? Like what was your point where you realized that, and how do you actually do that in a sense, at least for you? Because for me, I always have this kind of nagging guilt in my back when I'm not working. I'm just like, oh, you could have sent out 10 emails in this time, in a sense. Not that I don't love my family and my friends and everything else, but that's something that I really struggle with.
Yeah, I was 8 years old. No, I'm just kidding. I was at Deloitte, and I was probably 28-ish, and I had just gotten married. Probably been married for about a year, and it was one of those runs at work where was in that kind of 14-hour a day gig for 2 weeks working on a project. And it's really funny. Deloitte's such a great culture. As with any firm, we have strengths and weaknesses, right? But we're very known for our culture. And this is kind of a neat example. The partner who ran my area, I was a senior consultant at the time. And this was kind of the wake up call that maybe I'm over indexing a little bit on work. He actually sent a very nice gift to my wife to say, "I'm sorry that we've been monopolizing your husband's time so intensely for the past 4 weeks." And the fact that he sent that gift and I never thought of sending a gift or even mentioning it or in any way calling out the fact that I was completely out of control professionally for the past month was sort of the first time I was like, wait a minute, I can't have the partner in charge of my practice be more attuned to my own personal balance and that of my relationship than I am. So that was kind of my first, bell that went off that said, maybe you need to be a little more proactive in managing those different levers in your life. So
that's a good one. If other people are noticing, maybe there is something for me to look into. Okay.
Yeah.
Nice way to put it. When in consulting, I think a lot of Penn students have an idea of what consulting is, versus having actually, been in that early point in their career where they're actually getting to do things and running around. Because in Penn it's very nice. Maybe you're in a club that does consulting and everyone listens to you. It's lovely. I seriously am willing to put money that it's a little different when you actually get into practice, in a sense. What is, in your experience, in a sense, the biggest misconception people have, or the thing that we should know about consulting that we don't going into?
One of our CEOs at Deloitte we have many CEOs, typically about a 4-year term within our firm, and we've had many of them since I've been there. Unfortunately or unfortunately, I've have a few years and seen a few CEOs come and go, but one of them was a great guy named Jim Moffitt. And someone asked me, what is a consultant? And he said, it's a serial problem solver around issues that are all relative to business. whether it's government, whether it's life sciences, whether it's retail, whether it's banking. But great consultants are, at their core, problem solvers. It's really funny, and having a child, recently go through it, only put an exclamation point on it for me with my daughter who went to Michigan. But, when you're in school, and I'll use a story to bring this to life a little bit, but when you're in school, you take your classes and, and in your classes, you're, counseling and coaching the CEO. So in your management classes, how would you advise the CEO around this operational or supply chain issue, global supply chain challenges, geopolitical dynamics, we want to regionalize our supply chain more. How would you advise the CEO and the head of supply chain around how you handle, the China, Western Europe issues and how that might drive you to regionalize your supply chain? Look, keeping it real, when you first start with a consultancy, you are not talking to the CEO. You are not solving those issues. You're part of a team, and you're probably doing a lot of research and, development of early conclusions and, putting together documents and, et cetera. And, I think that two things about that. One, and these are almost contradictory, Harsha. One is patience and knowing that you're not going to be sitting with the CEO, day one as a 21-year-old off campus. But also, a discontent and aspiration that no matter what task you're doing on a project, what role you have on a project, you're doing it with an eye towards that day when you are the lead problem solver, the lead idea generator. And while you're building that document, you're not just concentrating on the fonts and the graphics and but you're focused on how the storyboard was put together, and what the end business issue is, and the research that you're doing, and how that research connects to the end findings that are going to be compelling and meaningful to that CEO or that head of supply chain. So, again, be patient that you're not going to be talking to the CEO day one at 21 years old, most likely. But everything you do, preparing yourself to be great at that when that opportunity comes. And the more you prepare yourself and challenge yourself and think like the person who's going to be talking to the CEO, the more you do that, the more prepared you'll be when that time comes, and the quicker that time will come as well. Because your leaders, whether they're partners or whatever your construct is, your business, will see you as somebody who's prepared to do that. And the only way you're going to be prepared to do that is if you begin with the end in mind and start thinking about that, as soon as you can or as early as you can in your career.
So kind of have that end goal in mind. So don't get lost in the mundane, but don't be afraid to go and do the mundane, because that's how you're going to go and actually achieve that in the way.
We had a staff person from Cornell who worked with me when I was a senior manager, one level away from partner, and she was an analyst, first year out of Cornell, and she was unbelievable at putting together PowerPoint documents. Today, that was kind of the standard. It's kind of still part of the standard today, but she was amazing at doing research and amazing at putting together documents. And what that allowed her to do was she was so good at it that when I was preparing to, the time I was in the human capital space, when I had meetings with the CHRO at Whirlpool and she was working with me to put together a document, first of all, I challenge her not to just be putting together a document, but to be really thinking about the storyboard and the content and the research that goes into it and how we're going to get to findings. And I really challenged her to not just be typing and worry about fonts and construct, but to be thinking about the business issue and our approach to present solutions around it. And she was, super aggressive, proactive herself, and that chemistry was magical. And she went on to be far more accomplished than I ever was at Deloitte, which is, it's always fun to watch that happen. But that, aspiration and that focus kind of from day one, even though you don't have the title and the end product, end game responsibility, I think is really important to develop your career as proactively and aggressively and as you can. So
No, good advice in a sense. I like how you mentioned, okay, she was good at this one, like this really huge chunk of it, where she's doing the research, she's doing that and all of that. In our last discussion, you also mentioned something very interesting about knowing your strengths and your weaknesses in a way. And I wanted to call back to that because for some people it's very clear, okay, I'm good at this thing. This is the thing that I kind of excel at in a sense.
yeah.
And that kind of shines and encompasses and overshadows the weaknesses. Most of us, I feel, at times we're just kind of average. Or at least we don't know what's the good and the bad in a sense.
Yeah.
How do you learn to assess what is the thing that I'm good at versus the thing that I'm not so good at, and internally kind of reflect? How did you figure out what was the niche thing that you were good at?
Yeah, I always kind of, as a person and as a leader, manager, reviewer of coach, mentor of people, my kind of theme is always amplify the positives and seek to manage the challenges that you have as an individual. And when I coach somebody, one of the things I try to emphasize with them is, look, here's what you do well and here's what's special. And let's just think about how to amplify it, how you can get better at it, how it can become more core to your brand, how you're identified, and the types of opportunities you can be afforded within whatever it is you're doing professionally because of those great strengths that you have, because we all have them. We all have great strengths. The question is, how do we continue to build them? How do we vector them towards something that's productive, whether it's, in radio, television, film, or investment banking, or not-for-profit, or whatever, but being able to vector those great talents to something that is, valued and productive. And then the third thing to think about is your weaknesses. We all have them. And I get really focused with the people I mentor and coach. Number one, do not beat yourself up over it. We all have them. They all look different. Some are more visible than others. But first, do not beat yourself up. Second, is understand that on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being, long way to go, 10 being we've arrived and it's a strength. Don't expect on your weaknesses to ever be a 10. If you're a kind of 2 or 3 on, some part of your personal portfolio, the odds of you getting to a 10 is probably a stretch. But challenge yourself to, when I see there's kind of 3 types of people when they look at their weaknesses. One type of person says, I want to be great at it. And that person, you love their aspiration, but you got to manage it because they're probably never going to get there. That's kind of one kind of person. The other kind of person is like, I'm not good at this. I'll never be good at it. It's just, I'm not a good public speaker. I'm not good with math. I'm not good with whatever. I'm not good with numbers. I'm not good, and that kind of person is kind of the person that you're kind of like, okay, but you're settling. And, if you're in a role in a job or a career that calls for some of that and you're not willing to try to move the needle, that might be a problem. The third type of person says, okay, on a scale of 1 to 10, I'm a 2 or 3 right now. Thank you. And understand that. I know I'm not going to be a 10, but how do I improve my game to get myself to a 5 or 6? And how do I give an effort that's not exhaustive or distracting or all encompassing, but to help me get from a 2-3 level to a 5-6 level or a 4-5 level. So I'm just moving the needle forward. The people around me in my ecosystem see that I'm trying, and it looks awkward. There's sometimes, when I first began my career, I had a reputation for not being super tolerant for poor work and poor effort. And there was this one young lady who, was struggling with her effort and energy, and I was working with this other young lady who was my kind of right-hand manager go-to. And she and I received this piece of work product from this person who's kind of struggling with their attitude and their energy, and it was not good. And I, gave feedback back to say, hey, this isn't where it needs to be. what do you think? It took a very consultative process with her rather than saying, this is terrible, fix it now. And my manager, she said to me, she goes, "You looked really awkward there." And I was like, well, because my weakness is that I would normally just kind of snap and maybe not be, very supportive of this person's journey. I'm trying to change. And when you try to change, you very often look awkward. So I had a couple of choices. I could keep doing what I always do that's a weakness and be predictable, or I could try something different, a different strategy and approach to improve myself. But it's funny, the people who know me are like, boy, that was kind of awkward. And I said to her, I said, my hope is that it looks awkward today. But as I continue to work on it and get better, hopefully it will look more natural and less awkward over time in my journey to improve on what one of my weaknesses was, if that makes sense.
I really, really like that way of looking at it. And think, I actually, now that you've mentioned it, I think I've seen a lot of people try to change a behavior or a habit or something that, a way of reaction, to put it better, that doesn't necessarily, spell productivity for the team. And when they try to change it, they get kind of stuck in that awkward loop of growth.
Yes.
That it becomes a little, that they'd rather regress than, the awkwardness in a sense, and then go, oh no, how do I kind of navigate in that sense?
Yes.
And especially I find with team leaders, in a sense, I work with very different team leaders at times. Some of them managing teams with me, some of them managing me, some of them like lots of different levels, and a lot of them have very different styles that and to be very and presumptuous, assuming they're all on kind of their own journeys of perfecting that.
Yeah.
It can get a little bit tough to be able to be in that awkward phase or make mistakes when you are the person who's supposed to kind of be overlooking and managing. And it's something that I face all the time, and I worry about endlessly, in a sense, is how do you be on that journey of growth when people are supposed to take direction and look from you?
Yeah, what I found is, and this is a word that football players aren't supposed to use, but ex-football players, but I think people appreciate, and this is not a new thing, I'm a big believer, you talk about the different generations, the boomers, Gen X, Gen Y, millennials, and as a leader in a very significant business, you hear a lot, the Gen Y folks just don't get it. The millennials don't get it. And I kind of don't agree with any of that. I kind of agree that we're all people, we're all going on our journey. And if you want to be a great partner at Deloitte, there's some core attributes that are non-negotiables. You have to be smart. You have to be creative. You have to be innovative. You have to have a great work ethic. You have to care about your people. You have to be great with clients, et cetera, et cetera. Those core attributes may look a little different generation to generation, but the reality is you either have those or you don't, and we have unbelievable partners who espouse those 6 or 7 attributes I talked about, who are boomers right through to millennials and beyond. So I'm a kind of big believer in that. But to answer your question directly, I think as a leader, people appreciate. The reason why I kind of went on that launch was because I think people believe that maybe it's more fashionable now than it used to be, and I don't think that's true. And it's the attribute of authenticity, vulnerability. I didn't have to learn that because I kind of naturally gave some of that, but I didn't know the term for it. I didn't know I was being vulnerable by showing my strength, my comfort with my own personal strengths and weaknesses. I didn't know I was being my authentic self right back in 1994. Those terms are different, but the behaviors aren't, right? And I think our staff people appreciate seeing vulnerability and authenticity in their leaders. I think projecting confidence and helping people understand that you got this is important. Good thing, good attribute, right? If you're flying on a plane, you'd like to have your pilot say, "We're in good shape. I know what I'm doing." You don't want them to be their authentic self all the time and say, "I don't know if I'm gonna." But I do think that being vulnerable, showing vulnerability, being an authentic self in front of your team, I think is a really good juxtaposition to self-confidence, assuredness, experience, and kind of projecting that part of your leadership style. I think it strengthens you and improves your perception amongst your team when you show that vulnerability. I think it's a good thing.
Very nicely said. And as we wind down, I want to touch on this term that you used in a sense, serial problem solver. I'm
Yeah.
gonna quote
Yeah.
that like now, like very nice way to kind of wrap that up.
Yeah.
There, when you are in a business consulting and all that, there are many factors that essentially go into that relationship between you and clients, between you and people in your team in a sense. You kind of have to solve the problems, and they have to trust you to a large extent, I'd say, in a sense,
Yeah.
that you are coming up with the right information, data, all the way to the decision that they can implement. So, what do you think is the most important
Yeah.
aspect of that? Is it the data? Is it the authenticity? Is it, the team? Is it projecting that you have the confidence in a sense?
Yeah.
What do you think makes a serial problem solver effective in cultivating that authenticity and that trust with?
Well, it's interesting, Harsha, because in our business in consulting, some of the big players are Deloitte, Accenture, McKinsey, PwC, Boston Consulting Group. Let's say are five, incredible firms, great competitors. Pretty much when, let's say you are the CFO, of Harsha Inc. And you are looking for a partner, consulting partner, around some kind of acquisition you were doing. Me from Deloitte, Accenture, BCG, we all have similar methodologies. We all have similar approaches. We all have super smart people. We all we all have, a lot of the same bag of tricks, tools, accelerators, assets that we all bring. There's a plus or minus, 15% variability around that. But I think, the difference becomes, you think about it, just personalized. Like, so let's say, you're that CFO, you're doing a big acquisition. It's really important for you personally in your career and for the business itself. Dave from Deloitte comes in as, first person, and, Jane from Accenture comes in, and, Nyan from BCG comes in, and yada, yada. And it comes down to a little bit, who do you trust? Who do you want to work with? Who gives you that right vibe? Who do you think has your interests in mind, not just theirs? It gets to be a very EQ driven process. And I think what differentiates, a good consultant, problem solver, from, the next level down, so to speak, is the energy that they put into their work, their attitude, their degree of humility and arrogance, the other side of it, the side of humility. And, that working style, I think, is what you, Harsha, as CFO, is going to make your decision on based on our experience. It's not who has a better tool, who's a better assets, better approach. They're all going to look so darn similar. You're not going to be able to tell the difference. It kind of comes down to, who do you really believe in? And then the other part is, who can show you that they've been there, done that before with companies like yours. Those tend to be the two things at the end of the day that kind of differentiate, one set of problem solvers versus the other is their ability to kind of sincerely convey the fact that they have your interests in mind. They've been there, done that. They inspire confidence, but they also inspire trust.
And I really like that. And to kind of bring it full circle as we wrap up in a way, I think, a lot of us, when we're starting out, we're very, driven by, I wouldn't say the data. I would say we're driven by, getting the data at the very least. We want to be the smartest in the room. We want to be, the person who knows the most theory. We want to be the people, in a sense, who kind of know what's going on here and there, that sometimes that EQ portion is, I wouldn't say neglected, but kind of rushed through in a sense. We're like, oh, I need to do this, that to get people to kind of connect to me. And it's
love
very
that. We
surface level.
love that. I want to compete against those people. I hope they all go to work for our competitors, because again, at the end of the day, we all have that, and what differentiates one versus the other is who do you trust, and you trust me because of my track record, the experience that I bring, and how I project that I'm in it for us, not me, is I think a huge differentiator that people kind of don't get. Focus on what you need, what your interests are, what your win is, how you win. And if I'm driving towards that with you, that gives me a super advantage versus somebody who's focused on themselves and their own business, their own profitability, and their own gig. You'll pick up on that. More often than not, you'll pick up on that as someone who's deciding between one set of problem solvers and another set of problem solvers.
As the CFO of Harsha.
As the CFO of Harsha.
Very
profitable, successful company, I'm sure. So.
Yep. Run fully by people named Harsha.
Definitely. Exactly. Why not?
Yeah, I'll round them all up on LinkedIn. To kind of like final question in a sense, before we end for today, I really love this discussion. I think it really sheds light on the people side of who do you need to be to succeed, to thrive, to actually build that trust, be that person, work on your strengths, your weaknesses. In your experience, in a sense, how do you, in this process, I'm sure, hopefully, you've made some mistakes and that you were not perfect and had everything go 100% according to plan. If you did, great for you.
No. No.
But especially in things that are very EQ driven, or even things that are very, very people driven, mistakes seem very terrifying, because when it's a math or a science problem, you can just blame the math, you can blame the science. When it's a people thing, you only got yourself to blame, in a sense. And I feel that it can be really tough to admit and work on the mistake, in a sense. How do you cope with making mistakes, and what's your advice to all of us who aren't experts at that yet?
Yeah. Well, hopefully I have time. I'll do one funny technical mistake story that'll give your viewers a chuckle or a cringe. I don't know which one, but it's really interesting. When I was a new manager, really important client, we were doing unfortunately a cost reduction, headcount reduction effort in a very large insurance company. And one of our new staff guy, very aspirational, incredibly talented, super successful now, at Ernst & Young, super successful guy. I'm home and he calls me. He's like, DR, that's what he called me. DR, I got a real problem here. I'm like, what? He's like, I'm on a project and the work we're doing around headcount reduction, I left the list of people that are going to be terminated on the copier.
Oh.
And then I went to get it and it wasn't there.
Oh.
I'm like, dude, you're fired, man. And I said, how you feel about it? It's a learning, and there's not many bigger mistakes you can make than that kind of mistake. And what you kind of get to is that atypical or endemic? Is that atypical of him, which is a cringe and move on and learn from it? If it's endemic, then that becomes a problem, right? But that was kind of a interesting mistake that was not EQ driven, that was just more technically driven, that it just says we all make them. We all make mistakes. The question is it a one-off atypical event, or is it systemic and endemic, and that becomes a problem, right? Can't keep doing those things. But they do happen, and they do happen, and they are certainly recoverable. In terms of behaviors, the one behavior I would really watch out for, especially for this audience of high achievers and super talented, aspirational people, which is probably a big part of your audience, is don't get too caught up in your own success. Be careful not to think too highly of yourself. Jay Wright's a basketball coach at Villanova University, won a couple, national championships, and his big tagline, and I had one of these wristbands that said it on it, is humble but hungry. Bring a humility to what you do, how you do, what you've accomplished, and keep the hunger. When you lose the hunger, and you don't have that drive, game belongs to those who are working hard today. And you have to keep that hunger, and humility is so important. So I think the one behavioral attribute that can get you in trouble is when things start going well and you're riding that wave and it's all good. Be careful not to project that too strongly. Understand the challenges are right around the corner, and it's easy to fall off the horse. And don't lose your work ethic, and be careful how you project your confidence in your success, because it can turn people off.
We could do another 45 minutes just on that, but I'm like, you had to end with that? Like, oh my gosh, but never mind.
Leave them wanting more, Harsha. Leave them wanting more. That's the
right. for the sequel. But
yeah,
but
exactly.
Thank you so much. This interview made me think a lot. So I really appreciate all of your thoughts, all of your experiences. I'll make sure to check where I'm leaving my list of termination the next time,
They don't really use copiers that much these days, so that's a little less of a risk. So
wrong email thread. I don't know. Anything could happen. But thank you so much for your time and for spending it with us. I only hope you had as much fun as I and our audience did listening to you, sharing your stories with us.
Go Quakers.
Thank you. And with that, to our audience today, thank you so much for listening and for tuning in. This has been Changing Reality, and we see you every Thursday here on WQHS Radio. Bye.
You're listening to Changing Reality. Changing Reality, where we bend reality all across the world. Only on WQHS Radio.